Second star to the right. And straight on till morning.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City. And now, somewhere along the Alpha Quadrant, it's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian.
I know that you are not feeling particularly well right now, so we will not make this a long episode, but
I don't think it would have
been anyway
a long episode.
Oh, okay.
I have a few things to say about the Undiscovered Country.
Okay. Star Trek 6.
Yeah. But not a lot, honestly.
Wow. And that to me is a complete surprise, because I think a lot of people feel that this movie has a lot to say about the world, especially of the time. And so it's interesting. Now, maybe you don't have a lot to say psychologically speaking, but sociologically, this movie has a lot to say about a lot of things. The Cold War, Americans versus Russians, Chernobyl, the aftermath of a potential nuclear war or accident, and then just prejudice in general. So I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts on the arcs of these characters, specifically as they started in the original motion picture and have now ended in Star Trek 6. But before we get started, we've got a few housekeeping things to take care of. There are a few little announcements. The first of which is I am very excited, because another reason why we can't make this an incredibly long episode is that later today I will be going to a screening of a documentary that I happen to be in. And it is a subject near and dear to your heart, I know, which is Star Wars. But specifically, it's about Star Wars, the holiday special. And it's called A Disturbance in the Force. And it's actually a really, really good documentary about the making of the infamous Star Wars holiday special that, of course, we all know and love, or loathe, or loathe to love, or love to loathe. It's a divisive holiday special at the very least. But I'm excited about that. So
I'm thinking that we should probably just cover the holiday special. It's a little odd we didn't consider it when we did the entire Star Wars
according to Lucas
series,
it's not considered canon, but
right.
But according to Filoni and Favreau, who have sort of taken over as heralds of Star Wars, it seems like it is canon. So maybe we can cover the holiday special. Maybe we'll do that during the holidays themselves. That would be...
Yeah, I'd do that.
That would be fun. Would it, though?
Would it be fun? Of course.
It would mean...
I don't know that I can make any sense of it. I've only seen it like one time.
It means we would have to watch it. But it's... But you can't go wrong with a good B. Arthur song and dance number in a cantina. So I'm looking forward to that. But if folks get an opportunity eventually, hopefully we will see it hit online. There may even be a short theatrical run for it. Who knows? But it is called A Disturbance in the Force, and I highly recommend people check it out. I am all over it with my pandemic hair. Couple of other quick little things. You and I just recently watched Batman: The Doom That Came to Gotham. And I should remind folks, even though that came out, I believe, about a year ago, the Blu-ray DVD combo has a featurette, 13-minute featurette on the making of the film and the story. And you are heavily represented in that doc. You say a lot of amazing things. So I highly encourage folks to go and check out The Doom That Came to Gotham, if not the movie, at least the bonus features. What did you think about that movie, by the way?
I really liked the movie. I was just about to say the movie is a lot of fun. It's definitely leaning on the supernatural.
Yeah, specifically HG. I was just thinking H.G. Wells because I'm thinking about this movie.
Probably would have been better, but
H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
So like very much Cthulhu demonology and the spiritual stuff like that.
Yeah, it's good. It's based off of the graphic novel. It's very, very close to the source material. I've actually not seen the bonus feature you're talking about. I never
because you tend
really
not to watch
them.
anything with yourself in it, right?
But I do remember filming it, and it was a lot of fun. So I think the bonus feature is only on the physical copy. I think you have to buy that.
Yeah.
But
if you get it digitally, you can get
it's there.
Yeah, you can get it. Maybe not on Amazon or something like that, but if you get it at like Vudu or Movies Anywhere or something like that, you do have the bonus features there. So that's a good thing. And then
it's online somewhere floating around.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm not recommending going and looking for a free copy of that. So we will not mention that. But the final thing that I think we have to mention to folks is, as of yesterday, our poll went live for what to cover after Star Trek. This should have been the final episode of our Star Trek run, but we decided to continue on to Star Trek 7, specifically because it is sort of the end of Kirk's arc. And especially since you were appreciating him more and more every movie, this seemed like the right thing to do. And so yesterday we put up our poll for what to cover next. There are 4 titles on that poll. 2 of them tied for second place in our last poll. So we decided that they would automatically get put onto the ballot here for our next topic. That would be Harley Quinn Season 1, which can be found on Max, and X-Men the Animated Series Season 1, which I believe can still be found on Hulu. And then we decided to add 2 Dark Horse candidates in there. One of them is a TV series that you and I have already covered Season 1 of in one episode while we were doing the MCU, and that is Loki Season 2, because it's about to premiere. Drea, how excited are you about the possibility of doing an episode or a show as it's airing?
Well, one of my regrets is that we didn't cover Loki episode by episode. We dedicated one of our podcast episodes to the entire first season, and there's just so much about that show psychologically that's interesting around Loki's arc and his struggles with moral reasoning and who he is as a person, his identity development and relationship building. So there's just so much there. I'm glad we had a chance to cover Season 1, at least in a comprehensive way, on one episode. But to be able to cover Season 2 episode by episode sounds really cool to me. It'll give us a chance to do a deeper dive. And I haven't seen any part of Season 2 yet. I don't have access to that, so
sure.
It'll be a surprise too. We'll both be seeing it for the first time.
Is that anyway a concern for you
No.
that maybe this season doesn't hold up psychologically speaking?
No.
That the tables have now turned and it becomes an action show because he's now got to go.
No.
Okay.
No. I'm confident in the storytelling. I believe the people who write Loki understand that he's really well loved because he occupies a very gray area, kind of the in-betweenness of being good-natured and also being somewhat somebody who holds grievances. And he struggles with that. And I think that's why a lot of people love him. And I think that's why the story will be pretty rich when it comes to his arc. But you're right. Covering a show that neither of us have seen before has its risks versus X-Men, of course, an animated show we've both seen probably multiple times. And then Harley Quinn, which is really well acclaimed as an animated show. And I think it's up to 4 seasons now.
Yeah.
So, I think, honestly, however the vote goes, I'll be pretty happy.
Did you mention what the 4th candidate was?
Gargoyles.
Yeah, a show that has been...
I've never seen this
recommended to us so many times over the course of our podcast, and oddly, a lot over the last year. In fact, we were talking with a good friend at Comic-Con who was sort of selling us on the plot. And my understanding, especially not just from him, but on other folks who have commented and recommended that we do Disney's Gargoyles, is that it is likened often to the depth of Batman the Animated Series and X-Men the Animated Series, in that there is a significant amount of character growth and arcs, and that it's not just a simple action adventure show, and that it's something that we would get a whole lot out of. I have never watched the show. You just said you have never watched the show, so I'm very curious about it, especially because the lead character is played by Keith David, who I've always been a huge fan of.
How would I know Keith David?
The Thing, or They Live, or any number of other...
The Thing?
He does... Well, he might have been The Thing. In the end of The Thing, there's Kurt Russell and Keith David. They're the two survivors, the lone survivors who don't trust one another because they don't know if one or the other is the being. And he is the other survivor. In They Live, you would recognize him as the African-American bald gentleman that has the 20-minute fist fight scene in the middle of the alleyway with Roddy Piper.
Yeah, I remember that. So he's done a lot of voice acting.
A whole lot of voice acting, animated series. He does a lot of video games. And you would recognize him from countless things. He has just had such an amazing career. So the idea of having him as the lead of a series is exciting for me. And the villain, I'm told, Jonathan Frakes.
What?
Yeah. So
really?
and I think if I've also heard this correctly, Marina Sirtis is also a character in the show. So we could jump right from trek to trek.
We can trek from trek.
We could trek from trek to trek. Anyway, how do you get to vote for what we cover next? Very simple. Go to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions. Join our $3 tier, and that gets you a say in what we cover. We're very excited about our next journey. But I think we should start talking about the end of this journey. Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, one of the even-numbered movies. So thought by many to be very high in their rankings of Star Trek films. Again, as I said before, during Star Trek IV, it should come as no surprise or even maybe coincidence that the common denominator between the even films in the 80s and 90s was Nicholas Meyer. He wrote and directed Star Trek II, co-wrote Star Trek IV, and then also wrote and directed Star Trek VI with a lot of input from Leonard Nimoy and folks who developed that story. They say in Hollywood, we always make the same movies over and over again. I would argue that Nicholas Meyer is kind of doing that here, in that prior to working on Star Trek, he did a television film called, I'm sorry, I think it might have even been right after Star Trek II, which would be interesting. He did a television film called The Day After, which was a groundbreaking and frankly terrifying account of what the world would be like after a genuine nuclear holocaust. Going so far as to depict for the first time on screen what a nuclear holocaust would look like. The actual explosion and the destruction. It was so terrifying to folks that the network, ABC at the time, requested a number of edits be made to the movie, and they included a disclaimer at the head of it about how it depicted
discretion is advised.
That it was absolutely it. Like, if you've got kids, sit down and watch it together and then have a very frank discussion about what it means to be here in the Cold War. And in fact, the film, after the movie on ABC, they aired a special debate between folks like Carl Sagan and William F. Buckley and I'm trying to think of other folks that were involved, but it was like a round table discussion of what this movie means, and is it propaganda? Is it terrifying folks of nuclear, the capacity of nuclear energy and or war, or is it a warning for what could come when you're talking about two countries that are just stockpiling nuclear warheads on top of each other, and who has the most, and how could that possibly end well? And I think the beginning of Star Trek VI is that exact situation, when immediately after the opening credits we get the destruction of Praxis, the Klingons' homeworld moon, and chief resource for energy. And so they zoom in on it, and Praxis is more than half gone. And it is declared that the Klingon Empire only has 50 years left of existence. And so the question becomes, what do we do with these lifelong enemies? Do we now welcome them into the Federation? Do we help them? We've been at war with them for generations. There's a neutral zone in between us. Are we now going to get rid of that neutral zone and allow safe passage of the two communities? And so, yeah, I would say that this movie starts right off the bat with a very important question. What did you think?
I understood that Praxis is deteriorating, or had that explosion, because of the way that Klingons were overmining its ecosystem. Like,
yes.
it had. I think my understanding is that due to their overutilization of what they were doing on that moon, that is what led to its demise. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important piece of this. Like, they contributed to what ultimately would lead to their own fate.
Yeah.
And I think that adds an element to the decision making around becoming allies, protecting them, or intervening in some way. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's this sinus medication.
Yeah.
But I am just not feeling. I have two ideas that are swirling around in my mind.
Okay.
One is, I had not come to care for Klingon folks based on the previous movies.
Yeah, because all we've ever seen is, I mean, you go into it with Kirk's mentality.
Right. And so I feel sort of not annoyed, but maybe it's a frustration that I see where this movie's going to take us. And I wish they had given us more exposure to Klingon culture and moments with more intimacy with them.
Sure.
Ones that I've experienced with the handful of Next Gen episodes I've seen. So I just felt I felt that I don't know, not manipulated, that's too strong, but just I sort of felt like, well, you brought me into this under bias. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you're saying that's probably intentional?
On purpose. Yes.
And
I think we are meant to feel the same way about them as the crew of the Enterprise, particularly Kirk. The only person who is willing instantly to reach out a helping hand is Spock. And for him, it's about logic. It's about the fact that this is what the Federation is for. This is our purpose. Like, we are not a military.
Sure. And I actually really like Spock's positioning or positionality, or both, in this. And then the other idea kind of swirling around in my medicated brain was I wish I cared more about Starfleet. And I normally do.
And this movie doesn't help with folks' thoughts on Starfleet or feelings on Starfleet
and so,
either.
yeah, I just sort of felt like, I guess if you destroy each other, this movie is going to be very powerful. Mm-hmm. And they actually, getting into some of the sabotage that we learn about, there is a little bit of co-conspiracy and self-destruction and the sort of like, well, you earned this.
You reap what you sow.
Yeah.
On both sides, really, too. I mean, because they really let Kirk have it for his previous indiscretions and insubordination and all of that.
Yeah, and he finally does get punished. Mm-hmm. He's very severely punished in this film. And then, to circle right back around, there is some, I almost want to name it, like, is it human saviorism? There's a very human-centered story here. Mm-hmm. And I think I was yearning for Spock to become... Spock is very instrumental. Spock's wisdom is kind of what takes us through to to illuminating us about what's actually going on in this big story. But I guess I would have wished for more of those moments, those longer moments of consciousness and insight that I've gotten from even movie 5, where a lot of people just, didn't like it and felt it was over the top or whatever.
But you want more talking and an inflection and, or sort of self-reflection and
I guess,
that stuff. It's interesting, too, because Nicholas Meyer has had a pretty successful career as a novelist. He wrote, I believe, 5 books in the style of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, specifically Sherlock Holmes stories. And so it should come as no surprise after having seen this movie where it's all about solving the mystery of the whodunit, that Nicholas Meyer is your guy. Like, this is who you get to write a story that will be a murder mystery. I think for me, if we're going to talk about the sort of the qualms we have with this particular movie, for me, the movie falls short in the middle, where the crew of the Enterprise has to do it without Kirk and McCoy. Kirk and McCoy are found guilty of assassinating Chancellor Gorkon, played by David Warner.
They're put on trial.
They are put on trial.
The Klingons.
Correct. The prosecuting attorney is General Chang, who is one of the top advisors to Gorkon, who was a witness to the assassination, where 2 Federation uniformed people came on board the ship after having destroyed their generators for gravity. So the Klingons are all floating around in their ship, while 2 Starfleet folks come on board with magnetic gravity boots, and
or as I was thinking, Daft Punk came through
and
shot up every one of these purple-blooded Klingons.
Correct.
A handful of Klingons perish.
Mm-hmm.
Some are injured.
Yep, one of them has his arm completely blown off by a phaser.
It's an attack.
Yeah.
And an assassination.
An assassination.
Right.
Kirk and McCoy go over to Kronos 1, the battle cruiser, to try to save Gorkon. He ends up dying. His last words are, "Please don't let it end like this." And of course, he's referring to the relationship between Starfleet and the Klingons. Don't let us go into war. And then they are arrested by General Chang, put on trial, and sent to Rua Penthe, an incredibly harsh gulag somewhere in the middle of the coldest areas of space, apparently, because it's the entire planet. It seems to be kind of the Arctic. It's a incredibly cold, a Hoth-like planet, where just stepping outside could kill you when you get to sub-frozen temperatures. The Rua Penthe stuff, as fun as the escape is from the gulag, I'm not a fan of that material. And so
I liked it.
Did you?
I thought it was fun. It mixed it up. There are a lot of political meetings and
sure,
all of the talk of diplomacy.
I like the mystery stuff. Like I like the looking for the boots on board and announcing to Starfleet that our warp drive has gone down because we can't dock, or if we do, the killers will get rid of the boots. Like I like that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Rura Penthe is a nice reminder that this is space and that there are all different types of aliens and beings. And I think, again, we finally see Kirk. It's unfortunate that Dr. McCoy gets pulled into this punishment because, if anything, Bones had tried to save the life of the Chancellor, was just doing his job.
Sure. But he also had no knowledge of Klingon anatomy, should not have been operating on him at all.
That's true.
And was drunk on Romulan ale at the time. So I would say guilty. Guilty as charged.
Look, if you really want to get into the specifics of like crisis intervention, and I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't speak to the ethics of that disciplinary practice and the way that their board issues a crisis response protocol. I will say, though, for mental health specialists and licensed clinicians, you do the best that you can. If there is a psychiatric emergency and no other interventionist is available, you are encouraged to do the best that you can to issue or deliver crisis care, emergency crisis care. Now, the difference is that most of the time, that type of care doesn't put someone at risk at this level, where clearly this Klingon Chancellor needed a Klingon medical doctor.
Yes. Who was apparently killed during the assassination.
So I imagine there's some similar ethics here, where you are the only practitioner equipped to provide a service like this. You're the closest thing to a responder. You should go ahead and try, unless you have knowledge that, like, you have absolute knowledge that your interventions would do harm.
Yeah.
So I could see why he went ahead and performed CPR, life assistance. You do anything you can. And I don't blame him for that. I don't think that what he did, I don't think Bones' punishment should have been pretty much,
the rest of his life.
Life sentence at Ruapente. But what I was saying about Ruapente is, I kind of like those scenes because Kirk has fallen so far. He's finally, how do I put it? He's no longer received the privilege of getting, getting rescued by Starfleet or finding the cheat code to make his way back to safety. He truly is a prisoner.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I disagree only in that he knows he has a Viridium patch on his back.
Right, yeah.
He knows that the Enterprise is tracking him within 2 sectors. I feel like he's constantly cocky.
Yeah, he always seems to have a plan B.
Doesn't believe in a no-win scenario.
I think what I'm talking about, you're right. You're absolutely right. I think what I'm talking about is he does start his sentence. He's beaten up. Mm-hmm. He's treated just like anybody else in that gulag. Mm-hmm. And he's not getting that special treatment. And he, like his own resources, his own physicality, his own wit isn't getting him out of that situation.
Right. He needs the help of another prisoner who it even turns out is on the other team anyway, trying to assassinate 2 people who could actually come through with evidence. And the idea is it becomes a prison movie where the idea is to kill these 2 people because the information and everything that they have could actually end up bringing down the ultimate plot of the villains in the story. And so you got to send them off and you got to get them murdered.
Why do you not like Ruapente?
I think it's where the movie starts feeling cheap to me.
Cheap, like the makeups, or cheap as in the plot?
I won't say the makeups, but I will say the production. So I think the makeups are done well. I think the characters are all impressively gruesome as aliens. I do appreciate that Morgan Shepherd, who plays the sort of warden of Ruapente, and also is in real life, or was in real life. Sadly, he has passed. He had a false eye. And so when they cover up one of his eyes with a scar and all that, like it's a nice little nod to, we could get away with doing this and not distract the actor because he's already missing an eye. But I will say the snow, so incredibly fake. I mean, it's that classic potato flakes snow. It is doesn't seem particularly icy on the planet. When you go down into the mines, the walls are very clearly not rock, but big foam, structures, big. I mean, to me, what Star Trek does best is stick to the bridge. Everything after that, you start to eke by with your effects. And so, the longer we're in Ruapente, the less interested I am in that environment. I think Iman does a good job as sort of the Confederate. They're helping them escape, but then also double-crossing them at the end.
I liked that character. And I think, again, and I said this while we were watching the movie, that like when Iman crawls up in the middle of the night, like they crawl up onto Kirk, and I know why. They're trying to seduce him and like lure him into the plan, promise to help rescue him and Bones. It was interesting. The whole kiss. and Kirk goes with it. I that pulled me out of the movie. I'm just thinking.
But then you've got the same reaction that McCoy does when McCoy's like, "What is it with you anyway?"
Yeah, like, what are you doing? But, the payoff of all that is that this is a shapeshifter who admitted to finding the appearance, the body that would be appealing to these humans. And it worked.
Yeah. Yeah. But if I were going to trim time out of the movie, I would just cut Rua Pente. I mean,
you'd cut the whole Rua Pente out?
I mean, you can't.
Oh my gosh.
You can't cut Rua Pente out because they're not on board the ship. But from the screenwriting phase, I would have said, do we really need to get rid of them for this long? Because it just seems.
I don't know. I interrupted
And then the big
you.
dog with the fang, the giant tusk-like fang, like everything just seemed a little.
It kind of reminds you, and I don't think this is the point, but it reminds you that it's not all about Starfleet and the tensions
And
between
politics.
Exactly. That the people on top, the people who run this, the Klingons, the humans, the Vulcans, the Romulans, there are other races and peoples and communities that are in the margins. They're surviving space life. And it's not always about these foregrounded cultures. I think they could have gotten to that point in a different way, but this is a reminder of that. I think it's also a reminder of political corruption and social corruption, the kinds of things that we as the audience rarely get to see. We're often in the, having the gaze of the literal Enterprise bridge. We often have that sort of privileged lens of this is what it's like traveling through space. It's glamorous and it's entitled and it's centering ourselves. And meanwhile, here are these places and spaces where people are oppressed and imprisoned and have completely different lived experiences.
Yeah.
Again, I see your point, and there could have been a different way to point that out. This was a very comical scene or series of scenes with Rura Pente.
Yeah, because even the fist fight he has with the gigantic creature ends with him basically kicking him in the balls. I mean, he thinks he's kicking him in the knee, but then Iman's line, "Not everyone keeps their genitals in the same place, Captain." The whole thing is sort of played for chuckles.
Yeah.
And I never, ever get a sense of genuine dread or doom or fear from Rua Pente that I should. And so, yeah, I think that's just my only real qualm. My other qualm is a little piece of sort of continuity. We discover throughout the course of the film that Spock's new protege, Valeris, and what's interesting is if you know the ranks, she's referred to as Lieutenant Valeris. She's wearing the rank of a lieutenant commander. And then she's also, her uniform baffles me because the strap over her shoulder is gray, so it implies science. But she's wearing an orange turtleneck, and that means she's a cadet. So she's a cadet, lieutenant commander, and it baffles me. Anyway.
Well, played by the
Kim Cattrall.
wonderful
Kim
Cattrall.
Kim Cattrall.
From Mannequin.
And you will be interested to know that apparently when Nick Meyer and company originally wanted to write this script and make this movie, they wanted that to be Saavik. That Saavik was going to end up betraying them in the end. And Gene Roddenberry was so angry about that idea, saying that, you're taking a character that people have now grown to love and you're going to turn her into a traitor, which was Nick Meyer's point. Like, Nick Meyer was like, yeah, I want to prove that the people that we love might feel a certain way that we might not agree with and may completely alter the way that we look at them. and ultimately ended up losing that battle and created Lieutenant Valeris instead. But then said, well, fine, then I'm going to take someone else that we really love, that being Admiral Cartwright from Star Trek IV, and I'm going to make him one of the conspirators. Brock Peters, the African-American admiral that we know from Star Trek IV, turns out to be a villain in this film. And so he was like, great, well, I'm going to make a movie where one person that we know and love ends up being a conspirator. But yeah, so she is Spock's new protege. He wants to even recommend that she take over for him after he leaves the Enterprise. And
the crew, the original crew, is 3 months from
retirement.
Yeah, this is, well, and this wasn't even a planned mission.
Correct.
Right? Like, this is another one of those examples where they are off-ramping. They're on their way toward retirement.
Yeah.
They're now just kind of going through the motions toward their final retirement.
Mm-hmm.
And they get pulled back. It's Spock who basically volunteers them and nominates Kirk as co-leading this mission. And I actually did like that exchange in that boardroom where it was the two of them on opposite sides of the room.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
And by the way, I've got that scene here,
Yeah.
and we'll take a listen to this scene because it says a lot about these two characters, Kirk in particular, but it also it plays into one of the other little quibbles I have with the continuity of this movie. Let's take a listen to that now.
We volunteered.
There's an old Vulcan proverb. Only Nixon could go to China.
How could you vouch for me? That's arrogant presumption.
My father requested that I open
I know
negotiations.
your father's the Vulcan ambassador, for heaven's sake.
But you know how I feel about this. They're animals, Jim.
There is an historic opportunity here.
Don't believe them. Don't trust them.
They are dying.
Let them die.
So that's the conversation between Kirk and Spock, two very different views on what's going on. And we straight up hear Kirk's prejudice. Let them die, he says. Which, by the way, was an incredibly big battle between Roddenberry and Nicholas Meyer as well. In fact, Meyer has come out since and regretted the war that they had and the things that they said to each other when this was all going down. And in fact, it doesn't help that 2 days after this big fight is when Gene passed away. And
Oh, what?
but Gene's real problem with this movie was the racism that the crew of the Enterprise exhibits toward the Klingons. The look who's coming, or guess who's coming to dinner, and did you see the way that they ate?
Yeah,
Did you
look,
get their smell. You know, like he
Right,
really
right.
hated that.
There are lots of comments made by the Enterprise crew, including our main characters, that show their hatred toward Klingons, some of which I came to understand are stereotypes.
Correct.
That these negative stereotypes they hold about the Klingon race, the way they eat, the types of food they eat, their cultural traditions.
The fact that as we even as the audience are laughing at them because they don't know how to unroll their napkins and put them into their own laps. Like they don't know what this is for. This isn't something they would ever use. So as the camera tracks down the table, you watch each one sort of watch the other people to figure out what to do with a napkin and stuff like that.
Yeah, I get the sense that we are, and even throughout the film and at the end of the film, the main characters continue to reflect on the ideas and beliefs that they realized they held about the Klingons. It gets really tied up or commingled, at least for Kirk, with the trauma that he experienced involving the death of his son.
Yeah.
And that traumatic loss is put on, or the blame is put on Klingons as an entire culture,
Not just a rogue
race.
Klingon captain who went to the Genesis planet.
Right.
Yeah, he puts it on the entire empire.
He seems to equate their brutality and their aggression, their warrior culture, to the murder of innocence, and that's how he holds the narrative of the death of his son.
Well, and I've got the audio here from his personal log where he comes right out and says that. Let's take a quick listen.
Captain's log, stardate 9522.6. I've never trusted Klingons, and I never will. I can never forgive them for the death of my boy. Seems to me our mission to escort the Chancellor of the Klingon High Council to a peace summit is problematic at best. Spock says this could be an historic occasion, and I'd like to believe him. But how on earth can history get past people like me?
And of course, this audio was used in his trial later because Valeris overheard him recording it and then gave it over as evidence to get him arrested and convicted. So yeah, we get a lot from Kirk and his own prejudice in this movie.
Yeah, and I guess for Nicholas Meyer to show this side of him I think that's good writing, in the sense that Kirk is not perfect. He's vulnerable. He holds this grievance. It's this inflated, hate-based bias toward this whole group of people. And he's a leader. He's in charge of this mission. He makes decisions that are critical, and people rely on him for that. And I appreciate that we're to see this really kind of ugly side of him. And he's one of the more, especially in the clip that we heard, he's very emotional about it. And he's putting his emotions, and this is where I appreciate Spock. Kirk is putting his emotions at front and center. He's letting his emotions and his biases direct him. Whereas Spock is coming from a position of logic, right? A position of discernment. Who are we to judge how this culture lives out their day to day? Who are we to say our napkin folding is better than whatever? However they have their traditions. The point is, at the end of the day, they're at risk of extinction. One way one of the Klingons put it, I think, was like, this is cultural annihilation.
Yeah.
And to not intervene, cultural annihilation is not too dissimilar to staying silent or neutral amidst a genocide.
But also pretending, and by the way, I've got this audio too, because this is such a good scene. This is them at dinner as they're trying to represent the better of their each respective cultures. But a lot slips out here. So let's take a quick listen here, and this is exactly what you're talking about.
We do believe all planets have a sovereign claim to inalienable human rights.
Inalien. If you could only hear yourselves. Human rights. Why, the very name is racist. The Federation is no more than a Homo sapiens only club.
present company accepted, of course.
In any case, we know where this is leading. The annihilation of our culture.
That's not true.
No.
No. To be or not to be?
That is the question which preoccupies our people, Captain Kirk. We need breathing room.
Earth, Hitler, 1938.
I beg your pardon?
Well, I see we have a long way to go.
So yeah, they're using terms like inalienable, human rights, and even at another point, not in this scene, but in another point, Kirk even says we're all human. Everyone is human, like regardless of whether Spock considers himself human.
Rude. That was super rude.
And Spock even says, I find that comment
so
insulting.
Rude that you continue to center humanness, humanity.
Yeah.
And you're talking to somebody who doesn't share that identity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that Spock calls him out because that's rude. Kirk, this is a lesson about Kirk and about, I think, a lot of people. They're really unable to get out of their own individual perspective. And one thing that I'm appreciating about this film is the exercise of trying to get out of to see beyond your individual perspective.
Yeah.
To see the ways in which other people live their lives, or other beings live their lives, rather. I really liked the Chancellor's daughter.
Azitber. I only know her as Rosanna DeSoto. But yes, she has an interesting name.
The daughter of the Chancellor I really like her character. She is in this new. She's forced, rapidly becomes the new Chancellor. She is faced with all these critical decisions. Mm-hmm. She's pressured by her peers, the Klingon leadership to wage war and to surprise attack Enterprise. And she has to channel the wisdom of her father. I think she has her own intuition and realizes that the so-called Cold War wasn't working. And I think that, I think that she really has this pivotal role. She's also, I think she's like a cool cucumber. She has that command that's a little bit, it kind of breaks the stereotype of Klingons, right? Yeah. We expect her to be, to lust after violence or right. to, take every moment to,
strategize,
to be combative. Yeah. And she's not, she's very discerning and she's thoughtful and she's I think she really maybe gives us that intimacy that I'm looking for when I'm saying, give us what are we who are we protecting with Klingons? Help me understand why it's so important to be allies with them.
Sure.
So I really appreciated her.
I really like Gorkon. And I think it was in the bonus features years ago when I watched Star Trek VI. But if you notice, he has an Abraham Lincoln like beard, no mustache.
No, I did not notice.
No mustache, just the chin, just okay. the same pattern as Abraham Lincoln. He's assassinated the way Lincoln was, but I think he's also meant to play. Very similar to like a Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, Kirk even referred to Klingons as animals, not so dissimilar from the way that black people were referred to by white people in years and decades past. And let's be honest, there are people who probably still use the term today, but then he is desperately seeking peace between the two cultures. He wants to see the Klingons continue and flourish in this new society that they have sort of forced themselves into. So yeah, we're looking at.
Well, yeah, I mean, let me say too, you're right. There's a sense of like, give us a seat at the table.
Yes.
And we won't let you down sort of idea. Like,
right.
honor us a seat at the table. Let me be clear. You have not given us respect and dignity.
Mm-hmm.
But with diplomacy, we ask you, in peacekeeping, we ask you, give us a seat at the table. That I think is very similar. Like that character does come across as that peacemaking leader. And in a similar way, the assassination of this key figure leads to a lot of destruction, and the fallout is, has a lot of casualties and losses.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit. Well, I say we should clear up or complete Kirk's arc within these 6 movies by saying that, of course, we have seen him come face to face with the Klingons. They killed his son. He killed them with the destruction of his own ship. He then doesn't trust Klingons going forward. By the end, he has seen the error of his ways and delivers a great speech at this peace conference. I've got the speech here. Let's take a listen.
Your father called the future the undiscovered country. People can be very frightened of change.
You've restored my father's faith.
And you've restored my son's.
So, of course, this is coming around to what Gorkon said to Kirk in the beginning when he was beaming off the Enterprise. I think it was either when he was beaming onto the Enterprise or beaming off the Enterprise. But Gorkon straight up says, if there's going to be change, our generation is going to be the one that finds it the hardest to adapt. And now we are seeing Kirk adapting. He is seeing the error of his ways, and he is now actively trying to do good with this community, with this new thing between Starfleet and the Federation and Klingons.
I mean, yeah, but meanwhile, Spock had pointed out with good reason why from the beginning of this movie,
yes, but I think the problem
supporting them would have been a good idea.
Sure, but I think the problem with Spock in this situation is he has no emotion to cling to. There is no way for Spock to not have been right in the beginning and be right at the end. You need a character to realize these things, not preach it outright, and be right from beginning to end. And that's why Kirk is the lead.
Sure.
And it's why Spock is his conscience. So Spock is telling him all the right things. He's refusing to accept it until he then comes up close and personal with this mass conspiracy going on, amongst 4 different races of interplanetary species. But I mean, Spock, of course Spock was right. But if Kirk went along with him in the beginning, there would be no...
I know. There's no story.
There would be no movie.
I think the reason I point that out is that...
you love Spock.
Well, that Kirk gets the spotlight and
the cheers.
And the cheers, the acclaim. This is, again, the centering. I'm going to say it. This is why I said human saviorism.
Yeah.
He's come around and he gets to make the big speech.
Yeah. But do you and maybe I'm wrong about this, if Spock had made that speech, it would have felt preachy to me. Like it would have felt, it would have been Spock standing up and saying, well, it's only logical that we do this.
Sure. Well, let's talk about what Spock, because Spock is going through a number of emotions. He doesn't lack emotions.
Yeah.
He has just different control over his emotions. And one of his own betrayed them, betrayed Starfleet.
And we see him get physically angry.
One of his own let emotions direct her. Wouldn't we agree? Do we not agree that pure hatred for a group of people being the reason why you sabotage this mission?
I don't see her as having gotten emotional, though. That she's using logic. And he's
This is sort of the complexity of why logic and emotion are not
right
on two ends of one spectrum.
Right, which is the conversation they have in his quarters when he straight up says that, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the way that I understand it is that she has, and this is how people develop hateful beliefs and long-standing attitudes that drive their behaviors, especially when it comes to prejudice, is that it's a lot of times it starts with an emotional experience or a superficial interaction or a superficial emotional feeling. And the way that I understood why did she betray them? Why did she make the decisions? Why did she collude with the leadership in Starfleet and amongst the Klingons to sabotage this mission? My understanding is that it came from a firm conviction that Starfleet should not become allies with Klingons.
Yes.
Because of who Klingons are.
Yes. She is using data to inform her logic that Klingons probably can't be trusted. And then there's also that military look that some have, that outlook that some folks have, which is to say, if I don't have an enemy, do I have a purpose? And so a lot of those folks who don't want change are folks who are clinging to this idea that they need an enemy. The Klingons are their best enemy, their best worst enemy. And for some, after 50 years, this enemy will die and we will claim victory. Even though you're not the ones who were victorious, they blew themselves up. But yeah, so there's this idea that logic dictates that we need them to be on the other side of the neutral zone in order to continue the lives and the purpose that we all know. And so it's this idea of change that is suddenly terrifying to people. And I would even say potentially to Valeris as well. But I think Valeris is acting on this idea that logic dictates that she corners him in his quarters and says, doesn't logic say that we need this and this? And he's like, logic is only the beginning. It's not the end of reason. And he's trying to teach her this. And he even brings that up later when she's like, you didn't listen. And he's like, you didn't listen to me. And
then he smacks the gun out of her.
Exactly.
He gets incredibly feisty. He actually expresses emotions more in this film than maybe we've seen in the past. I don't know if I'm disagreeing with you, but I'm saying that she is perceiving her internal reflection as logical, but I don't think it's logical. I think it comes from a deeper emotional state. And I think she misunderstands it. And she's met with fear and hatred and anger, and she finds a way to excuse her decision-making by holding it to essentially being accountable to logic. And I think Spock sees this. I think this is why Spock is upset at her and shows his irritability and his frustration and disappointment in the way that as this was a person who was going to replace him, essentially. And he realizes we're not alike at all. Like you and I are very different.
Or perhaps he sees his old self, because remember the difference between old Spock and this Spock is death. He has now died, he has come back, and he is now embracing emotions ever since Star Trek IV more than we have ever seen. To now, he is now playing loosey-goosey with Starfleet rules and regulations. He's not following all blind orders anymore. He's lying. He is omitting. He is exaggerating. He is creating errors that allow the Enterprise to stay where it is and solve the mystery. Whereas old Spock may have been more like her. He might see a little of that old Vulcan, because this brings me back to the Kolinahr. You know, is she what he could have been had he passed the Kolinahr, where logic dictates the right move in their eyes? And now that he's allowing more emotion to seep in and he's becoming a little bit more of that human half of himself, he's cohesively bringing those two halves together into one, sort of perfect whole. And, and so I think maybe that could also be his anger at Vulcans. Although Sarek, let's be clear, Sarek seems to be on the side of a peace, wanting the peace treaty, but because you can't let Daddy Spock, be a bad guy. But
oh no, that would be bad. Well, let's not forget that emotional intelligence isn't only one's own ability to identify the emotions within themselves, to understand how to express them in effective ways, to understand how to regulate and manage emotions that are intense. It's also our ability to recognize emotional states and expressions in other people. And I think that he shows his emotional intelligence well when he's interacting with Valeris and sees, like, as things fully unfold, he starts to see that what is driving this person is hatred.
Yeah.
And he starts to realize that is a very, very different motivation than other moral reasoning, other sources of moral reasoning, like care and compassion and loyalty and equality, things that, yes, involve emotion, but again, have to Spock a logical understanding. And I think he's seeing how someone can really get those emotions twisted. Like, well, you're feeling those emotions and you're letting those emotions fuel such important decision making. You're letting it fuel your behavior. You're letting it fuel, or at least impact, the way that you see yourself and your world.
Yeah.
And I think he starts to kind of realize how different they are, or how much this person just does not represent who he would see as a Vulcan leader in this position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to use this opportunity to go back to a piece of audio, an audio submission by one of our listeners. This is Jorge asking a question that I think is very appropriate for this final film, now that we've gone through 6 movies. Let's take a listen to Jorge here.
Hi guys, my name's Jorge. I'm a diehard Trekkie, and I just want to tell you guys, thank you so much for going into this deep dive of this franchise slash set of movies. I have so much I want to unload right now, but if I can ask you guys one question. I heard Andrea talk about how Spock's resting bitch face reaction to the Enterprise crew is more like, kind of, I guess, a reaction to him failing his Kolinar. I want to know, do you guys think that he would have had like that reaction regardless of whether or not he'd pass it or not? Because he is Vulcan. Or if, he would have passed it, he probably, I don't know, would have let a smirk kind of, slip by as to kind of appease to his brothers and sisters on the Enterprise. Or how much of that was devastation, It's something I thought about, and I don't know why it took me this long to think about it. But anyway, thank you guys again. I'm a diehard Trekkie. On behalf of all Trekkies, believe me when I tell you, we're all really excited to hear you guys get into this. Live long and prosper. Thanks again.
So Jorge is bringing up the Kolinar and what we had talked about in the motion picture. This is one of those I wanted to save till now so that we could see the complete Spock arc without going into his cameos in Next Generation. Spock, after the Kolinar, I feel like I feel like his pushing the other bridge crew away was him overcompensating. I don't think that he was upset necessarily. I think he was trying to be the purely logical, no emotion Vulcan that he had just failed his ability to be.
I don't think I'm disagreeing when I say it's a defense.
Yeah.
It's a defense. It's a bit of an emotional defense. To say that Spock is half Vulcan and strives to actualize his Vulcan identity doesn't mean that he doesn't have emotional capacity, or rather, it doesn't mean that he isn't struggling with the emotions that he does experience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm being clear. In other words, to fail this is a huge disappointment. There's an incredible self-doubt.
Which in and of itself is failure of the Kolinar.
Yes. That's exact. No, you're so like the spiraling of this failure is so tremendous.
Yes.
Imagine failing this huge, critical exam, this way into this culture
that you've been preparing for your entire life.
Yeah. Of course he's going to feel disappointment, self-doubt. He's going to feel, less than.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have low self-esteem. He's going to have a lot of confusion. A lot of that failure is going to circle back, be redirected to his personhood. Yeah. He's going to blame himself.
Mm-hmm.
And the defense that I'm seeing is that emotional rawness, that emotional experience. It's so vulnerable, and it opens up so many wounds for him, and he's too exposed. So to counteract that as a defense, what he'll do is put up a guard, put up some armor, and come across as even more, we would say cold, but he might say logical. He might say that's what he should be doing, that this is how he should be presenting himself. And I think a part of the defense, like any defense, is I can't let anyone into the truth. It's too harmful. I'll feel too exposed. I'll feel too much shame. And so I need to put up layers and layers and layers of armor to protect myself.
Yeah.
So this is somebody who's just protecting their wounds. We might be in agreement then that you and I might be in agreement. Yeah, I'm not sure that this was anything different than that or beyond defensiveness.
Yeah. I think that was an excellent question, Jorge, and I hope we were able to answer it. I think it's safe to say you get an Arkham Sessions enamel pin. So we'll be in touch with how to get that to you. Let's see. Is there anything else we want to talk about? Anything else you want to take?
Yeah, I've always wondered why it's called the Undiscovered Country. I get that this is some line from Hamlet. I get that all of this bickering and political debate rests on fears of the unknown, that the unknowability about the future is a dread that everybody shares, and that if somebody or some group of people seems threatening, we sort of have this visceral reaction. It's more reactionary than responsive, I guess.
Right.
But other than that, I just really there's a lot of Hamlet in this, and I'm just not sure that
not just Hamlet. Well, you can't appreciate
lots of Shakespeare
yeah. without having heard it in its original Klingon. But it's also not just Shakespeare. There are a lot of references to Sherlock Holmes. As I mentioned, Nick Meyer has written 5 novels in the style of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, so he certainly knows how to quote a good Sherlock Holmes, and in fact even gives a secret, a little bit of, I guess it's an Easter egg, where we now know that Spock's lineage from Earth either has Sherlock Holmes in it or Arthur Conan Doyle, when he actually uses this line.
An ancestor of mine maintained that if you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
So there you go. You've got a little hint that Spock may be related to Sherlock Holmes in some way. But yeah, similar to every character in this movie, it seems, Nicholas Meyer is just a walking encyclopedia of quotes and likes to use them. And he's incredibly well read, incredibly well written, and he likes his characters to be just as educated. And so, yeah, there's a lot of great Shakespeare. You can see where the foundations of Vadic from Picard season 3 came from. Vadic, played by Amanda Plummer, daughter of Christopher Plummer, who chews up every single scene he's in Star Trek VI as Chang. So, yeah, I like that a lot. I also very much appreciate that up to this point, since 66, the opening has always ended with "To boldly go where no man has gone before." And at the end of this film, Kirk corrects himself and says, "To boldly go where no one has gone before." And that's been the tagline ever since. So, you go from 91 through 2023, we now use "To boldly go where no one has gone before," so that we are being inclusive and we aren't, gatekeeping who can boldly go. What do you think about that?
Unless you're in Ruapente.
Wrongly
accused.
Well, and you talk about the arcs of these characters. When told he needs to go back to space dock, Kirk says, the heading is second star to the right and straight on till morning, which is, of course, the directions to Neverland, where you never grow up. And you take a character who has really just sort of ruminated on how he's getting old throughout the entire franchise, and now he wants to go to a place where he'll be forever young.
There is for him that renewed, again, I've been mentioning that it's up until, well, between the second and third movie, he had faced a lot of trauma and loss, and there is a renewed spirit in this sixth movie toward the end. This idea, like, I feel like I'm getting older, but I've proven to myself I can change. My perspectives can change. My worldview can change. The way that I see myself and my relationship to other people, other cultures. Let's maybe lean into that undiscovered country theme. Yeah. There's more out there that I don't know about. There's unknowingness, the unknowability of the universe means I'm not so special, and I'm certainly not the center of it all. That renewed spirit and that idea of combating or somehow facing that dread, that uncertainty head on.
Yeah.
With exhilaration and with openness, with optimism. I think that's cool. I think, this is truly the sixth movie. This is the last movie. If that is the spirit that it wants to end on, I applaud that. It is not. It's definitely not in my top 3.
Okay, so I want to ask you what your current rating is. You know what? Let me hold off on that for one quick second. I want to bring up something that I think is very important. There is a key member of the bridge crew who has been there from the very beginning since 1966, who is now no longer a part of the Enterprise crew. That, of course,
that's Sulu.
Captain Sulu.
Sulu gets his own ship.
And he's got the Excelsior. I mean, a gigantic
I like the
ship.
shape of this ship. I actually could tell this ship from the other ships.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that because this is the ship that Scotty sabotaged in Star Trek 3 in order to get to the Enterprise and rescue Spock. It's also the ship.
I felt as if I've never seen this ship before.
It's also the ship that was directly in the foreground that we pass in order to get to the Enterprise A the very first time we see her at the end of Star Trek 4. So you've seen the Excelsior several times. This is just the one time that you remember it. But I want to talk to you about this because I think this is really important. It was always super, super important for George Takei to feel like there was representation of people who looked like him. And so if you look at the movies, quietly, Sulu keeps getting promoted.
Huh.
You get to watch Sulu rise through the ranks of Starfleet. And in the 6th film, he is the captain of his own ship. And they speak so highly of him at the end of the film after having helped them and blown up the Klingon bird of prey. By the way, remember that shot of the bird of prey exploding.
Okay.
I mean, even when they say, my God, that's a big ship. And then Scotty says, not so big as her captain, I think. They're giving Sulu his send-off. And in fact, so many people have wanted a Captain Sulu, the adventures of Captain Sulu, like a spinoff.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Series. That I wanted to talk to you about that because you have often talked about the need for representation and to see yourself and to know that George Takei pushed for this for so long to then graduate with his own ship. What did you think of seeing that?
Well, I mean, as you talk about it now, of course, this is well-deserved. This is a character who, again, I wasn't somebody who watched the original series routinely. I've seen some of it. But as I understand it, this is a character who's been a part of this crew from the beginning.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because Star Trek has always been... I don't know if they've been necessarily pushing the edge or pushing boundaries, but since the 60s, this show has put underrepresented folks on screen in characters that are speaking roles, in characters who are leading roles, in characters who have instrumental relationships to the plots. I've always seen Star Trek as having that forward movement and being on the metaphorical frontier of gender and race representation on screen. Sulu being a character who continues to kind of like in the story advance, here becoming, it's so interesting because we only see a handful of captains and it just seems like Kirk is admiral, captain, like just back and forth. You don't see a lot of other captains, but you get the sense that this is a very rare position of power.
Yeah.
And so Sulu earns this role, like the character earns the promotion. And for that to be a part of our relationship with Trek, I think it's a huge deal. And I know for Asian viewers and Asian American viewers in particular, this is really meaningful. It's something that I know was meaningful to George Takei.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. So now that you've seen the original motion picture series, what is your new ranking?
It's not going to be that different. It is 1, 2, 4, 5, 3, 6.
So 6 is your least favorite of all the Star Trek movies?
I think so. Again, it's not, I didn't miss something.
Yeah. And we even watched the director's cut.
I don't think I missed something. I think it was pretty clear.
Okay.
I'm going to be very judgmental here and say in 2023, in this body with these eyes and this brain,
and on cold medication.
And on some cold medication, I was not impressed.
Okay.
I like the other Trek stories better.
Okay.
And I had even said to you, what is happening with the Klingon folks? Because they keep surfacing, they keep hinting that there's this tension.
Yeah.
So the film series did a great job building that tension.
Yeah.
I just didn't get the payoff I was looking for.
This is now going to lead into then Worf joining Starfleet eventually, as the first Klingon to join Starfleet, and obviously the descendant of Colonel Worf, who was the defense attorney,
right,
for Kirk and McCoy, played by Michael Dorn again. So yeah, all right, 1, 2, 4, 5, 3, 6.
Right.
Interesting. You know what? Everyone gets their own ranking. That might be the first time I've ever heard that particular ranking.
I might have like an opposite ranking than lots of people.
Mine is 2, 6, 4, 1, 5, 3.
Okay. Can I ask you why 6 is your favorite Star Trek movie?
I
what
said
is it
2,
about? Oh, sorry.
6.
Can I
2, 6.
Can I ask why Star Trek 6 is your second favorite Star Trek movie?
For all the things that we've just been talking about. It does everything Star Trek does well, which is take something that is important to today's society and wraps it up in an allegory. And to me, just this story is talking about something that was truly relevant at the time and is even relevant to today's
right, yeah,
relationship with Russia. And so, and to watch characters have a genuine arc from prejudice to not only acceptance and tolerance, but genuine inclusion is a big deal. And so, even though I feel like it feels a little cheap in the middle, I think the payoff is worthwhile. Plus, as I mentioned before, I like a good murder mystery. And that's exactly what we get in this. And it's something we've not gotten in any of the previous Star Trek movies. This one tries to do something different by presenting us with a murder mystery and a whodunit. And I think it's done well. So now that we've seen Star Trek's 1 through 6, we've got one more closing out the story of Kirk with Star Trek Generations next time. After that, it's up to you. Again, go to our patreon.com/Arkham Sessions, join the $3 tier, and vote on what you would like to see us cover next. Will it be Harley Quinn Season 1, the X-Men, the Animated Series Season 1, Loki Season 2, or Disney's Gargoyles Season 1? It's entirely up to you. Till next time, Drea, why don't you tell the folks where they can find you online?
You can find me on my website, drdreapsychology.com, or on social media at Dr. Drea Psychology.
You can find me, I'm basically only on Instagram these days, but it's at B_Ward028. You can find us both on Twitter at Arkham Sessions, on Instagram at The Arkham Sessions. Email us at arkhamsessions@gmail.com. Come join us on Patreon, join us on Facebook. Come find us on Discord. We would love to continue our conversations there as well. And that's where you'll end up seeing live versions of our podcast and watch the movies along with us from time to time. Till next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
The Arkham Sessions.
Once again, we've saved civilization as we know it.